Hello, friends. Let's talk about video game prices. Are they too cheap? Are they just the right price? Or should they be more expensive? My opinion might shock you. Let's react. You know, we've all seen it online. People always complain about video game prices. Video games cost too much. Everything costs too much. Please don't raise the price. There are a lot of people that when games made the jump to $70, they were like, I'm out. I'm not paying $70 for video games. These things are getting too damn expensive now. And I gotta be honest, I see things a little differently. I, of course, don't want to spend any more money than I have to. I, of course, don't want to admit to companies you can make games more expensive and we'll buy them. I don't want that. I want to be able to buy as many games as I can for a cheaper price, of course. But at the same time, I can't help but look at video games as a very cheap medium of entertainment, especially when you consider everything else has suffered inflation. I literally went to Primo Hoagies yesterday and got Kim and I 2 sandwiches and 2 bags of chips and 1 Pepsi, and plus tip, it was $50 for sandwiches. And yet I can go and buy a full video game that people worked years on that will bring me hours of entertainment for roughly the same, if not the same price. And you're telling me that's not cheap comparatively to everything else in the world right now? We go back to the 90s and we look at video game prices. You look at this catalog here from Toys R Us. We see games at $70. $70 in today's value, equivalent back then, is $145. There's games here for $93.95 for Bomberman 64. In today's value, that's $192. We have games for $70, $80, $90, $60. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to these games' value. That's kind of the way things used to be. There were certain expectations for video game prices back in the day, and games went on sale for, you know, $20, $30 like they do now. But new game prices, they weren't this hard set $60. And I actually couldn't really figure out when that started. So I asked ChatGPT, which I know is not always 100% accurate, but this is pretty much what I remembered happening too. It was around about the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 area, mid-2000s. And it's only been recently in the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X that they've increased to $70. Let me show you this. So in the 1990s, game development cost between $100,000 to $1 million. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was estimated to cost between $1 million to $2 million. And at the time, that was a big budget video game. Holy crap, we're putting $1 million into a video game. It made the news. But now, AAA games are more often or not going to cost you anywhere between $50 to $150 million to create, with some over $200 million. And we have examples like Cyberpunk 2077 costing $330 million, Red Dead 2 at $240 million. Costs are being driven up. In fact, ChatGPT did some work for me here. AAA games have hundreds of people working on them now. They used to be much smaller teams. Modern engines like your Unreal Engine 5 and demand for photorealism, we want these things to get better and better. We want them to spend more time on it. We celebrate when game companies delay releases and spend an extra year. We literally yell at these companies like Ubisoft, don't rush this. Don't release it unfinished. Whatever you do, do not release this until it is ready. Take that extra year. Pay these hundreds of employees an extra year of salary to make sure my game is as good as it can be, but don't you dare charge me more, because that's the price I pay and that's what I expect and that's what games should be. But also spend more time making it better. Voice acting and cinematic storytelling, multiplayer and live services, marketing, all of these things drive the cost of video games up these days to the point where they're literally in the millions of dollars. And I think this is also, this set price of video games is a reflection of these big budget games crashing and burning and failing out because they have to rush, because they have to be quick, because they can't take the time needed sometimes, because ultimately they know that they're only going to get $60 or they're only going to get $70, and they have to work within that time frame and work within that scope and work within that budget, knowing that, hey, best case scenario, we have the best-selling game of all time, but we times that by $60 and it's this much money, and we cannot put more into it because we just aren't allowed to charge more for it. I don't want to go into the Wild West, and I feel like that's what would happen if we said to game companies, hey, charge us what your game is worth. If we can at least do a thought experiment here, it does does present some advantages if it's done correctly. And I want to remind all of you that you don't have to buy a game. If a game is too expensive and you don't think it's worth it, we don't have to buy it. So if we went into this Wild West idea of game developers being able to charge whatever they want for a video game, I do think it would be, in this scenario, in game developers' best interest to price their games accordingly so that they actually do sell. I feel like we've been very lucky that games have stayed at this magical $60 price tag for so long. When you consider that it's, as I said, less than half the price of what we paid for games in the 90s. And I think allowing developers to reach out and maybe charge a little more for some games that are worth it could lead to game companies and developers spending and investing more time in a game. Not in every case, but sometimes. And there's definitely games I would pay, I hate to say it, but $100 for. Very few. But games like GTA 6, that's a $100 game. Pretty much anything from Rockstar I'm going to look at investing money into because I know I'm going to get the return on it. There was a big conversation about should games be $70 when Ratchet and Clank came out for the PlayStation 5. Because you could finish that game in about 8 hours. And a lot of people said that game shouldn't be $70 because it's only 8 hours long. And I do have some thoughts in that. I don't know if Ratchet and Clank is worth $70 over some other games that have come out for $70, but I do think it's interesting that a lot of people break down price to just length of a game. I would much rather play an 8-hour game that is awesome from start to finish and I have so much fun the whole time, like a roller coaster ride I don't want to get off of, than paying $70 for an 80-hour long, poorly written graphic novel video game with bland characters that I don't have any fun with. But I had 80 hours, so I juiced my $70, right? I did something for 80 hours, but it wasn't fun, right? A game like Ratchet and Clank, just using that as an example, it had great voice acting, it had brilliant animation, like literally Pixar, Disney level movie animation in that game that all flowed seamlessly in with each other. The visuals were stunning. The sound effects were on point. The ray tracing light effects, some groundbreaking new technology we haven't seen before, utilizing the SSD with those super fast load times. There were a lot of things that took a lot of time and effort and energy and resources and smart people to create a really cool and fun experience. I'm not saying it was the best game ever, but I'm saying that there were a lot of things that went into that game that made it really quality that I think drives the price up to $70. But I can play a game like Ratchet and Clank and see where the $70 is, it just isn't in game length, which I think was where it comes down to studios in this Wild West idea of being able to price their own game to take all that into account. If there was a more variable price gap to equal it out. If I was spending $100 here, but then $50 here, and I'm saving that $20 here, that would have been a $70 game. I don't think everything has to be $70 moving forward. And I don't think $70 and that $10 price jump is enough for some studios. Ultimately, though, if this is where we're at, where every game is just going to be $70 for this whole next generation, I mean, that's good because in my opinion, that's still much cheaper than what games used to be. And the fact that they haven't inflated in cost is awesome for us as consumers. I don't know how we're getting away with it, honestly. Like, it is crazy to me. There are people that think it's insane we're going up to 70 and that corporations are greedy for it. While meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, whoa, dodged a bullet. We only went up $10. Everything else has gone up. I'm spending more on milk. I'm spending more on clothes. My bills are getting out of control. Electricity is insane. But I am still only paying $60 for games like I have been since I was 20 years old. $70 does not seem like a big jump to me. This Vice article got me thinking about, has the video game console era plateaued? The former CEO of the president of Sony said, we've done these things this way for 30 years. Every generation, those costs went up and we realigned with it. We've reached the precipice now where the center can't hold. We cannot continue to do things that we've done before. It's time for a real hard reset on the business model, a hard reset on what it is to be a video game. It's not 80 hours, it's not 90 hours, but if it is, that's a whole different category. He talked about how games that take 30, 40, 50 hours to complete, even himself, he ends up lagging behind. And I think we all know what that feels like. I'm definitely experiencing it right now. Metaphor just released. I'm having a lot of fun with it, but the more I play it, the more I realize I'm not even halfway through. Mario Party Jamboree just came out, which is infinitely playable. Before I know it, more games will come out. Silent Hill's already passing me by, but I'm stuck playing this 80-hour RPG. And then he's saying he can imagine a future where these RPGs become even more niche, with developers too afraid to commit years of their time to the hard work just to have them thrown out without warning. Publishers will be too afraid to take the financial risk when an FPS could take less time and turn a profit quicker. Again, this goes into what I was trying to say. What if a game like Call of Duty stayed at 60 or stayed at 70? What if Witcher 4 came out, or the reboot of Witcher, and it was like Witcher 3 again, all that content? What if they were able to charge $100? Imagine a world where they could charge $100. Suddenly, you're going to have developers thinking differently. Right now, we don't get a lot of quality games like a GTA 6 or a Witcher 3. Games like Elden Ring, where everything just seems to stop for a few weeks while everyone gushes about Elden Ring. It barely ever happens. Barely ever. With how many hundreds and thousands of games are coming out? Barely ever. And why is that? It's because only the top companies that have a ton of money can afford to even try to make a game like that and hope it's successful. And it still fails a lot of the time. You look at Cyberpunk, for example, was a big failure from a company that's had a huge success like Witcher. But in a world where companies know if they can invest more time, they will be able to charge more, we might have more developers actually attempting to make fun games and put the time in, rather than developers just trying to make a free-to-play model game with a battle pass. If there was actually a market where developers were able to charge what their game would be worth, for them to invest the hundreds and millions and billions of dollars that go into making video games, maybe we would have a future with more awesome experiences coming out. And sure, those experiences would cost $100 at launch, but they would go on sale. They would get cheaper eventually. Let the people that can afford to pay for them, and then you get them on Black Friday. But at least we're getting more of these quality games, and we can move away from these horrible cash-in, microtransaction, soulless cash cow type games that we keep getting. I feel like a lot of issues we have in the gaming space does stem from the price of video games compared to how much they cost to make and compared to how much they used to cost. And I just wonder if there is another way. There's a way that developers can invest their time into bigger and better experiences and not have to worry so much about $60 or $70 deadlines. How much would you pay for GTA 6? If Rockstar decided it was $100, would you buy it? I think a lot of people would. I also think there's a lot of games that come out now that just price themselves at 60 or 70 because they can, and then they don't do very well, and they would have done a lot better if they were cheaper. This is something I've just had on my mind for a long time. Again, growing up buying video games and not seeing the price change and then thinking about how much they were back in the day, I've always wondered how developers have managed to keep that price so cheap with the insane boom in cost that it does cost to develop a video game. Do you think $60 or $70 is already at a maximum of what consumers can afford? Is that already too much for a video game? Brand new 4K movies cost $30, $40, and it's something that you watch for a couple of hours. You go to any theme park, it's going to cost you $100, $200 if you're at Disney to even get in for the day. Literally Starbucks coffee now. You want to get a frappe or two for me and Kim? I'm at $15, $20 on that. You want to throw in a breakfast sandwich, I'm at $25, $30. Everything costs so much money now, and it's so easy to leave the house and just spend $50 accidentally on something. Every time it happens, I can't help but have that little part of my brain go, this is how much a whole video game costs. This whole conversation I'm having right now about should things cost more might come across as a very nice situation as I stand in front of a massive wall of video games, and I'm aware of that. I'm aware that not everybody can afford to pay more. But I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a give and take. My example with games being 100, I would like to think that conversely, other games are cheaper. So you save money here and you pay more there. And I think about that all the time too, and how hypocritically insane it is to constantly yell at game developers and Sony and console makers for bad performance on things or low quality on things, but also not keeping things at an absolute record all time in the history's low price possible. There has to be a middle point or there has to be a solution. But these are thoughts that go through my brain a lot. And if you can help me calm them down, I'd appreciate it. Leave all of your thoughts down below. I hope you understand where I was coming from in this conversation. I really don't want to alienate anyone, and everyone's opinions are totally valid. We're all at different places and positions, and we all see things very differently. I love you all. Like, comment, and flip on that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.